Yeah, to introduce the chairman of the session, Mr. N K Ranganathan. He's a former managing director of Grundfos Pumps India Private Limited. He's a 1980 batch XLRI. He's done his business management from there and a post degree in mechanical engineering from College of Engineering, Guindy. And he's worked in manufacturing and projects both in India and abroad. He's presently an independent director on some listed and non-listed companies and on the advisory board of a number of NGOs. And above all, he's an avid photographer. That's what. So Mr. N K Ranganathan will introduce the other speakers, and let's look forward to a very productive session.
Thank you, Vicky. And again, good afternoon to all of you. We're running a bit late, so we'll try to catch up on some time. And I request also the speakers to see if we can sort of speed up things, because we have lost about 45 minutes. We'll catch at least 30 minutes back if we can. Otherwise, we'll deny them their lunch. So, having said that, I think Saraswati started talking about what you call resilient, low-carbon, vibrant Chennai. And I think she or Keshavan said resilient and low-carbon, resilient and vibrant, yes, low-carbon later. So I was just laughing to myself. We also became low carbon. When there's no power, nothing runs on the road, everything is quiet, it's full of water, we are low carbon. And we have one way of doing that. As far as vibrancy goes, I think we are all still being very vibrant after all the trouble that we went through. We still have not got over it. The trauma also creates vibrancy in a different way. And resilience is very strange. As Indians, we are quite resilient. Anything can happen, we somehow survive. We are survivors. And one of the things that sort of came to me before, when the IAS officer, he spoke about the final words of J. Krishnamurti, seeing is acting. In the world of blind, like all of us are, we see and don't act. That's the unfortunate situation that we are facing today. And I was just discussing, we all feel very great when we create a disaster and then sort it out and say, wow, what great job that we have done. And that came out in some of his things there. We create the disaster for what? Do we feel good about creating the disaster and solving it out? We never learn. One of the issues that we should do, I was just thinking, why are all the NGOs starting to feel so great? They're doing a great job. I don't deny it. I'm part of a few NGOs. Why not use and raise the same kind of money to start mitigation when there is no disaster, and to build the resilience and make sure that we talk to the right people and do the right things? I've always said, I've been in the water business for long. You go on building because of your own greed, destroying lakes, destroying water bodies, destroying all those places where water overflows from one lake to another, and build buildings. It's not going to ask you permission to come in. You're occupied. We as human beings are occupying water bodies. We as human beings are occupying forests. You see the kind of man-animal conflict that is going on today. It's completely disastrous. So I think all this business of natural disaster, like he said, is unnatural. It's up to us as human beings that we create the right ecosystem to survive. Everybody says, we should be very friendly to the earth because the earth will disappear. The earth will not disappear. You and I will disappear. The earth will continue to be where it is. It will go around the sun till the sun disappears and the earth will disappear. It's the human beings that will disappear. So if we don't get it right, we're going to have a problem. And today we have three eminent people talking about it. And I congratulate Saraswati and team for calling the right people. When we have these huge water issues, we have Professor Janakarajan or Dr. Janakarajan here from the Madras Institute of Development Studies. He's an expert in urban and rural water. Dr. Janakarajan, I've been part of a lot of think tanks on water with the previous government, before Mr. Modi and all that. It's strange that you have 17 ministries handling water. Water is only one thing. So water for human beings is different from water for agriculture, is different from water for industries. And we all share the same. And when we started mooting this before the Ministry of Water Resources was formed with 4 of them, the IAS officer is also there. Your colleagues started laughing at me. You expect all of us to work together to have one water. It doesn't work that way in the services. but we somehow prevailed to a certain extent. So he's the president of the South Asia Consortium for Interdisciplinary Water Resource Studies and a steering committee member of the Forum of Policy Dialogue and Conflict Resolution for Water in India. There were many suggestions that water should be handled either in a river basin or a water basin kind of thing, and not based on states. We've been pushing that, but it's not gone very far. In fact, we even spoke to Bangladesh to see if the Ganga can be handled from there right up to the river as one authority on it. But hopefully that would come. Then we have Mr. Benjamin John. He serves as the C40 Senior Manager for Climate Implementation. He's an architect, urban regional planner, and urban designer. Urban planning, Mr. John, today, the urban planners of the government are reduced to giving approvals. I don't even think they are even thinking long term. And invariably the thinking is, if there is thinking, it's a 5-year, 6-year term as long as the government survives. Urban planning is something that we need to do over 50 years perhaps, or even more, and make sure that everybody is trained to look at the right kind of environmental management that we need to. And I presume you're the expert at it, and you've also been with the National Institute of Urban Affairs and the Dutch consultancy firm. So hopefully you will throw some light as to what we could do. Then we have Dr. Ranjit Daniels. He's a graduate and postgraduate in agriculture. From the IISc Bangalore. Incidentally, Dr. Daniels, my father was also a graduate in agriculture from Hebal in Bangalore. But having looked at agriculture from a very close area, one of the most profligate users of energy and water are agriculturists. It's a holy cow or the elephant in the room which nobody wants to even see. India cannot sort its water problems out if you don't sort the agriculture problem. In terms of use of water, the per square foot use of water or per square meter use of water, and the per square meter production of what you call, whatever you produce in terms of crops, which I understand the Philippines and Vietnam do better than India in growing rice, and we are a large rice growing nation. So he's an adjunct professor of the Advanced Institute of Wildlife Conservation, Vandalur. He has served as an expert on campus environment management and the cell of IIT Madras for 15 years. He designed an eco-friendly campus for IIT Mandi in Himachal Pradesh. When you look at the environment, we need to have a holistic approach. Yes, we can handle things in bits and pieces because that's what we can do, but unless until we plan holistically, and that's where the urban planners come, I think most of the time we will be talking to each other in these conventions and nothing will happen outside. We are great as Indians. I've worked with 70 nationalities over the last 40 years. I never tire of saying this. One of the best brains, the most innovative brains I've seen is an Indian brain, and one of the most indisciplined brain I've seen is an Indian brain. We are great at planning, we are great at thinking, we actually are zero at implementation, because everything stops at the implementation stage. We are bad. And I'm saying this very, very openly because I've seen this happen very often. We are changing, but the change has to come. And if real changes need to come, it has to come with all the stakeholders. We just can't keep blaming the government or because say we will do it. We need to work together to ensure that we have an approach which actually mitigates the situation that we are in today. Otherwise, we'll have floods again and again. We'll have drought again and again. So now I'll request Dr. Janakarajan to start with. And I do hope you did some sense into all of us and we'll start doing something.
Thank you, Mr. Ranganath, for nice and good introduction. And you remember we had more interactions when you were with the CII on these water-related issues, more so on how to be water positive. Right. So this actually is something which I would continue as with the introduction of Dr. V. Tirupukar, and he has really given me a good introduction. So I will probably continue from what he has said. So I generally use the 3 phrases. One is, you will see those 3, no more, and no more neglect, and it's now or never. So these 3 phrases I always use in most of my presentations because We have done enough damages in the past, and there is no learning. And we continue to contribute to these damages, and suddenly, you realize that you are in a disastrous condition. It's not disastrous condition, and then you really think about what could be done and what is next and so on. So let's learn and see how we can act, and at least now, and if it is now or never. That's the kind of a context in which I am trying to say. Now, basically, the idea is to, rediscover. The flood is something which has been happening. It's not for the first time that's happening in Chennai. So we have got to rediscover, because every flood is going to give us a lesson. So let's rediscover this flood in Chennai in 2023. It's not moving. Yeah, but I'm not able to see from here. Is it moving? Which one is this? This one, is it? Okay. Okay. So, what are the key issues? I don't know whether I'll be able to finish all these slides, but I will try and finish as much as I can. Basically, let's figure out what the issues here are. The key issues are, one, the unusual heavy rainfall years. We have been, confronting periodically, and that is becoming common in India, just not in Chennai. You will see in the context of Chennai, you have seen heavy rainfall years in 77, 85, 2005, 2015, and 2023. Please underline, I am not calling them flood years. These are heavy rainfall years. Okay, that's very important. I will come back to this issue later on, why I don't call them a flood year. Second, the recent floods, quote and unquote, are associated with the climate change. Are we hiding behind climate change for all our blunders committed so far and the past? Do you remember Dr. V. Tirupakar made in his presentation the blueprint for inaction? So this is one of the blueprints for inaction. So this is how we attribute these floods to, for instance, about climate change. If there's going to be a heavy rainfall here, oh my God, this is a rainfall here causing floods, and so this is because of the climate change. This is hiding behind climate change. Let's not do that. So that is what he called as the blueprint for inaction. To what extent floods occur due to historical human errors or blunders? Have we ever thought about it? This is what I call the accumulated risk. If you remember, Dr. V. Tirupakar also mentioned about this. The accumulated risk is something which we have to acknowledge. To what extent conventional wisdom followed by the state have yielded to mitigate the flood? There is a conventional wisdom. Whenever there is a flood, the state runs into action. Lots of measures have been undertaken. But to what extent these measures have proved fruitful in the past and today? Although each one of these floods are unique in their own way, the impact is devastating and increases year after year. Let's talk about that. You will see floods every year, but then impact is also increasing more for event after event. The current flood is considered the worst in the last 47 years. Again, there will be one more event after 5-6 years that will be considered the worst, because you are accumulating the risk over a period of time. But the key concern is, have we learnt any lesson from the past flood events? Have we resorted to any kind of a corrective measure which is sustainable? What should be done with a view to making the city of Chennai flood resilient? Do we have a way out, and how to really convert disaster into an opportunity? Again, referring to Dr. V. Tirupakar, he said, every disaster is an opportunity. Have we learnt lesson? Now, how to convert these disasters, so-called disasters, into an opportunity, and so that you really talk about, quote and unquote, in real terms, sustainable development, sustainability. That's something very, very important. We have to think about. Now, we have to really understand the urban India, and particularly Chennai. What are the key challenges? Without really understanding, no point in complaining about the flood. Let's talk about what are the key challenges. Rapid urbanization. We can't. We are part of this process. And this urbanization process is increasing the scarcity for land. Today, you all know that in the Chennai metropolitan area, the population is 1 crore plus, 10 million plus. Now, compare it with, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, what was the population? Now it has gone up. As per the 2011 census, 26,000 people lived per square kilometer. That's the population density. Today, we have more than 10 years. The population density would have crossed 30,000. To that extent, the scarcity of land has gone up, and to that extent, we have created a lot more impervious surface. Keep that in mind. And also, it results in decreasing per capita drainage space. Per capita drainage space is extremely important. We don't care about the drainage space. We contribute to pervious surface everywhere. There is absolutely no pervious surface, and so that results in increasing, decreasing drainage per capita drainage space. That's one of the main reasons why the floods occur. And then rising slum population increases vulnerability, rapid industrialization, and as I said before, vanishing permeable surface, vanishing floodplains, flood buffers, wetlands, water bodies, natural drains, and poor waste management. These are all the key challenges we really have to understand, and which directly can be associated with the floods. Now, remember, very, very important issue that we are all part of. Not that we can get ourselves disassociated with this process. The issue is a bad, myopic urban planning and a mere development-centric approach can be disastrous to ecology, environment, which eventually put enormous pressure on the entire economy, present as well as future generations. Again, please recall, in one of the slides, Dr. Tirupagad mentioned that 2 wheels in a cycle. One wheel is going towards the development, other wheel is towards the sustainability or whatever. These two are in the opposite direction. How can you talk about sustainable development when you are completely development-centric? You also have got to be ecocentric. That is not there. A mere promulgation of law will guarantee nothing if policy implementation and monitoring mechanisms are weak. Again, he mentioned this. No point in resorting to stringent laws, stringent acts, but then where is the policy implementation, monitoring mechanisms? These are extremely important, and these are some of the issues which I thought I would really make it now. This is a slide which is actually borrowed from the Care Earth. Ranjit Daniel is here, where they really talk about the land use pattern and encroachment, which has resulted in quite a lot of encroachment of the water bodies in Chennai as well as in the Chennai metropolitan area. You see the difference between the 1891 and 2010. We are in 2023. Quite a lot more of encroachments and land use planning have been done, and we really don't know. This is the extent to which we have occupied the land. The red is basically built-up area. So rapid increase in the built-up area. If you increase the built-up area, like this so rapidly over a period of time, naturally it is going to cause all kinds of blockages in the drainage system. Again, and this is something which can go into details, but I will skip it right now for the time being, except to tell you that the built-up area has gone up tremendously in the last 2-3 decades. Now let's have a quick recap on the past floods. 2005, if you recall, the maximum rainfall recorded was on October 27th, it is 270 millimeters. This was in 2005. And lots of controversies going around about the rainfall statistics in the context of 2015 and 2023. And you'll see that as with the IMD data, in 2015, Nungambakam recorded 340 millimeters. And again, in 2023, Nungambakam recorded 530 millimeters for Chennai, in Chennai. Whereas in Meenambakam recorded 440 And in 2015 and 2023, same Minambakam station recorded 460. So you will see that the rainfall is definitely more in 2023 compared to 2015. But for political reasons or whatever, there are a lot of controversies have been going on with regard to this. But what is real in 2023 is the fact that rainfall that occurred in the upstream of Chennai, upstream watersheds, is less compared to what you have experienced in Chennai in 2023. Maximum record was 56 centimeters in Chennai this time. Now, how do we understand the flood? We have been talking about flood all over, everywhere, and in all contexts. But what is flood? How do you really define a flood hydrologically? Hydrologically, flood is a flow concept. It's a flow concept. So when the river overflows, its bed width as well as the flood plains, when it goes out of the system, then you call it a flood. Until then, you will not call it a flood. But today, everything is flood. Everything is flood. For instance, you take a pond or a water body or a lake. You will have your construction there, industrial estate, housing board or whatever, and then you will forget it for 5-10 years. After a heavy rainfall, you will see that that area is completely full, but you won't call it a tank, but you will call it a industrial estate. But it's full because it is a flood, it is a flood prone area. Whereas without any construction, if that area is full, you will call it a lake. So this is a problem. So without really any kind of understanding, we call everything flood. So therefore, it is important for us to distinguish between inundation and flood. So what you see in most of the places in Chennai and in the Chennai metropolitan area is inundation. It is not flood. And that flood occurs because of the blunders, mistakes, all kinds of mistakes that were committed in the past. So this is important that we better understand. Now, again, what should we aim at? For all these flood concerns, there are normative concerns. What is that? One has to think about integrated urban water management as a strategy for long-term solution for climate-induced urban floods and droughts. Integrated water management. What is that integration? Integration is nothing but don't look at flood as a flood concept in an isolated manner. One, you really have to link it with all the previous floods and learn your lesson. Secondly, flood means basically excess rainfall here. You are getting excess water. So your idea should be to minimize the flood impact, minimize the runoff, and conservation of water. If you do that, you will be in a position to use that water during the drought year. Both droughts and floods are caused by several climate-induced reasons, but if you can mitigate both flood and drought, provided you are in a position to save water during this excess rainfall year. Therefore, it is important to have this kind of an integrated perspective. Secondly, identify a local solution which is eco-friendly, and it is very important that in this context, we rediscover thousands of water bodies that exist in the upstream. If you really look at the watershed, I will show you the map. There are thousands of water bodies in the upstream, in Chennai, Tiruvallur and Kanchipuram districts, and in the adjoining area, in the third master plan. Chennai metropolitan area is going to be extended from 1,189 square kilometers to 5,904 square kilometers, which includes 3 districts and Ranipet Taluk, part of Ranipet district. In that area, at least as per the tank memoirs, there are 4,000 water bodies. If these 4,000 water bodies can be restored and the capacity can be doubled, the flow from the west to the east can be reduced substantially. So your flood impact in the downstream in Chennai can be reduced substantially. This is what I think it's a normative concern. I think one should do. Can we do about it? What can we do about it? Is it possible that we think along those lines? Because it is very important that we acknowledge the fact that Chennai is part of a mega watershed. This mega watershed is linked to several watersheds in the upstream. Finally, water has to flow from west to east towards the sea. But if you really understand that, you will minimize this kind of a flow from west to east, and which can then contribute to minimizing the flood impact in Chennai. But can we do that? Is it possible? So it is very important that you really attempt on that. Secondly, is it possible to go with nature? Why should we go against the nature? Understand the hydrogeology, the geomorphology, and also the gravity slope of the Chennai city is very gentle. It's a coastal city. The slope is extremely gentle. But if you don't understand, if you don't acknowledge, you will pay for it. And it is so therefore it is I would very strongly advise to go along with the nature and then enlarge the lung space as much as you can. Don't close it. And integrate the conditions of too much water with too little water. I said flood and drought. And then it is important also that we resort to optimal recycling of the used water. I don't call it a wastewater. And then evolve scientific urban climate adaptation and DRR strategies for keeping in mind the limits to adaptation. Keeping in mind, adaptation is not something very generic. I don't want to use it generically because there are limits to adaptation. If 40% of the population live in Chennai, there are limits up to which you can adapt. I mean, you can't just apply the rule, just like that to the slum population. They can't adapt. There are limits to adaptation up to which they can go because their vulnerabilities are very, very high. Again, as Dr. Tirupakar said, the poorest of the poor are the most vulnerable. They are the ones who really suffer the most during all these, the disastrous conditions. Now, most important, build and enhance urban resilience capacities. Again, how will you do? From the community onwards up to the top. So it is very important that, these are my normative concerns. How are we going to do that? How are we going to implement it is something which, we really have to think about. Now, as I said before, it is important that we really understand the fundamentals in terms of location, rainfall, use and abuse of drains, and then watersheds, elevation level, and ecological hotspots. Chennai is such a beautiful city with all this. It is important that we record all this. Survey, make a scientific survey, record all this, understand this, and then you will know how to really behave and how to really act on floods. And if you don't do that, again, we will all be paying price. Most parts of Chennai is under low elevation coastal zone. I don't know whether you all understand it. We are part of the low elevation coastal zone. Low elevation coastal zone is one which is 10 meters and below. You will see that this is a list provided by the GCC, Greater Chennai Corporation, and they have indicated which are the areas are low elevation, 2 meters and 1 meter below. And apart from this, there are some areas which is at zero level. There are areas which is below sea level. Areas like Pallikannai, Madipaka and so on, is below sea level. So we really have to understand all this. Before you resort to some construction, road construction or buildings or whatever, please understand this. It's very, very important this information is available. And without understanding, if we really keep constructing our buildings blindly, we are going to pay a huge price for all this. This is the elevation, sorry. You have the elevation level, and which is, in fact, you will see that ECR compared to OMR is elevated. OMR is below. And you will see that Bakyam Canal is a ridge, and it's really upstream flow of water. All kinds of problems exist, actually. In this 2023 flood, you will have Kosasthaliyar, Koom, Adayar, they were all hitting with lots of flow with the Bakyam Canal, and Bakyam Canal was overflowing. And the overflowing Bakyam Canal resulted in flood situation in many parts in the ECR and OMR region. Anyway, it's important that we keep in mind this kind of situation. This is information provided by Climate Central, which is located in Miami. They have studied the Chennai. According to them, these are all the most vulnerable zone in Chennai, which is really going to become, this is Ennur region, likely to get submerged in the course of next 50, 60 years. And this is, the next one is North Chennai, again more vulnerable. See, North Chennai is going to become more vulnerable because of the Kosasthaliyar river. If the Kosasthaliyar river is allowed to flow freely to the sea after filling the wetlands, this disaster can be reduced. But we are obstructing. Ennur wetlands is now disappearing. We are going to construct more ports, which means we are going to elevate that land. The free flow of water from Kosasthaliyar river is going to get obstructed. The area of North Chennai is going to become much more disastrous, will get flooded. And you will see that this is South Chennai. It's even worse. There are going to be islands in South Chennai. This is not my information. This is information provided by Climate Central with whatever satellite images they have provided. And all that they are trying to say is that you have to be very careful. You are living in the low elevation coastal zone. This is going to become, this is going to result in disastrous conditions in future, in the course of next 50, 100 years. Now, this is not basically to alarm you. This is only to give you information about what should be done, what could be done. So it is very important that we understand the upstream, downstream watersheds. If we don't understand, it's very difficult, then we may not be in a position to survive. So look at the rivers. You see, to the best of my knowledge, I had traveled several times in several parts of South Asia. Chennai city is really uniquely endowed and blessed with these kinds of urban rivers. You've got Kosasila River on the north, Coom in the south, and Adayar in the south, and the Coom in the central, and Adayar south, and further south you've got a Pala River, and about 30 macro drains. It's an incredible kind of a drainage system we have. Despite all this, why should we suffer from flood? And not only that, each one of these rivers, Kosasala, Coom, Adayar, each one of these are part of a larger basin, and actually which is contributing to something like 897 tanks in this region. In this region of something like 800 square kilometers, they contribute to fill so many tanks, water bodies. And if you really link it with the upper watersheds, you've got 4,000 watersheds. It's beautiful. It's a blessing. But this is a blessing which we really have to make use of. And if we don't make use of it, it is a pity that we will be suffering. This is that larger watershed. This is the larger watershed which is part of, you will see the part of Palar, Vongur, Varahanadi Basin. These are all contributing water to Chennai. That is why this is called a mega watershed. We have to really now understand that we are part of a mega watershed. Chennai is linked to this watershed. The water flows from this west with so much of area, and finally it goes to the Bay of Bengal through Chennai. So you are flooded with the upstream water, not merely because of the water that they got through rainfall in Chennai. This has to be acknowledged. And this is the area where I'm talking about the prevalence of 4,000 water bodies. You have to spend, you need a political will. You really have to have this kind of an ambition to work on, regeneration and of water bodies, or even doubling the capacity of the water bodies, so that you store water. Idea is to store water where it falls, and so that you really reduce the flow of water to the downstream, and that helps both the drought and flood. So, and also river mouths needs to be really kept clean. And this is actually the 3 districts, our 3 adjoining districts. You will see that in Chennai, Chengalpattu, Kanjipuram. This is as per the 1971 topo sheet. We have had 3,600 water bodies in these 3 districts. This is a fact as per the 1971 topo sheet. You see, this is a Pala River. You see such a dense kind of water bodies, and you will also see that the kind of a drainage system that you had. This is a drainage system we have had, very dense drainage system. This is what I call about, this kind of a drainage system existed. So you will see that water that fell through rainfall was in a position to find its own way to the drain itself. Today we have lost most of it because we are constructed. Built up area is so high that we have lost most of this drainage system. Therefore, in summary, I would like to bring to your attention what we should do. Structural and non-structural. The structural is actually, you know all that. You can construct new check dams, barrages, redesign your reconstruction of dams, restoration, protection, and continuous monitoring of the rivers, floodplains, wetlands. All these are very important. This can be done every year. But in the long run, you really have to resort to quite a large number of non-structural interventions, which are, as I said before, tank restoration, desilting, deepening, and doubling the capacity of the water bodies, nature-based solutions, which is very important within the CMA, like, water detention ponds, constructed wetlands, temple tanks, and so on, and then utmost care for protection of natural wetlands. You see, Chennai is blessed with lots of wetlands, coastal as well as inland. We are lost. Pallikarnai is 1/10 remains. So like that, it's very important that legal solutions are, but most important, I would also tell you that individuals, industries, and institutions, what they should do. I mean, basically, this is what we were talking about, Ranganathan, if you remember, you've got to be water positive. Water that falls on your roof and on your plot of land is your water, you should own it. Take, for instance, the Radisson Blu, this hotel. Please go and see around. It's completely, the soil is, you can't see. It's a pervious, and the impervious surface or the pervious surface is zero. So water that falls within this area is going to go into the road, isn't it? Not even a drop of water will penetrate into the ground. So these people having sent this water from this area to the road, they will call it a flood, because this is water which goes to the flood, and they will call it a flood. And this applies to all of us, every individual, every institution, every industry, and every educational institution. They have got hundreds of acres in and around Chennai, all educational engineering colleges, universities, and so on. But then, why is that they are not in a position to save the water? It is this water which goes to the road. We call them a flood. So it is, in that sense, a collective responsibility, not just enough to blame good to blame the government. You really have to act. All of us have to act together, understand and acknowledge that it is a collective responsibility. Most importantly, we are all accumulating the risk over a period of time, and tomorrow, if one more flood occurs, you will call it a flood, more disastrous flood. So, I just wanted to show you this. Look at this. This is Valacheri, 71, and today in 2010. Look at this. And this is Pallavaram. Oh, sorry. This is Pallavaram, and this is, what is it? That's Valacheri. That's Valacheri, right? Anakaputtur, okay. And this one again, this is Paritipattu tank in Avadi. It's now reduced to this. And this is Ambattur tank. This is such a huge tank. It's a beautiful tank. One of the biggest tanks around Chennai, in Chennai. And this is now bifurcated. And they have changed even the name of the tank now. This is what it is today. And Kodingur, zero. It's completely gone. And this is Kodingur. I mean, this is Ambattur after the encroachment. And this is Kodingur, completely gone. And this is Kodingur. You'll see that, how it looks like. And the Villuvakam tank. This is Villuvakam tank, and what exists today is this. In fact, Villuvakam tank is about 272 acres. Now they have SIPCOT, and they got a housing board, big bus stand. In fact, in the latest 2023 flood, the biggest news was SIPCOT is underwater. This is the SIPCOT. This is the area where SIPCOT is constructed. And this is our Pallikene marshland. You will see that how it looks like. And that's it. I just wanted to, tell you that these are just, the lack of time. Due to lack of time, I was only trying to give you the information in a sort of a lighter manner. There are issues which I could have really said, which is more disturbing. And therefore, it is something which we need to act together and contribute to lessening the flood impact, and also we save the Chennai city and make the Chennai city more resilient. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I'd like to thank Saraswati Madam and Ranganathan also for the invitation to be part of this discussion. I think it's a very important discussion considering that we just come out of another flood. And I think Janakarajan sir also has kind of set out the contours of flooding in Chennai's context quite extensively. So what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about our work with Chennai and preparation of the Chennai Climate Action Plan. And I think more from a perspective of vulnerability. I think that was the topic that was given to us. So I'll just try and touch upon that, and maybe we can see how maybe in the discussion phase we can take some questions. I'll try and keep it very short I will not go through all the slides. So, little bit about the organization that I represent. So, I work with the C40 Cities Network. So, we are a network of cities working globally across the world, about close to 100 cities working together to address the issues related to climate change. And it really works through like a peer-to-peer kind of exchange between cities. That is one of our main USPs for working with cities. That we believe that cities can learn from each other and leverage the knowledge that they have. And then there's obviously technical assistance and knowledge management. So I would also, all the youngsters who are here, you can look at our page. We have something called Knowledge Hub. So there's a lot of information there on that page. C40 Cities Knowledge Hub. So there are a lot of articles, a lot of short articles, synthesized articles of knowledge from other cities and how cities have dealt with similar issues. So I'm not going to go through all this. So how actually cities keep their membership in this group by really showing leadership and acting on these issues. So in India we have about six cities totally. Chennai being one of them, Ahmedabad being the most recent one. So we've got 6 cities across India working on, in the C40 Cities Network. And recently we also launched the Bangalore Climate Action Plan earlier this year in November. And in June this year, the Chennai Climate Action Plan was released by the government of Tamil Nadu. So quickly about how this plan is made, what is the kind of framework that we follow. As any planning process, the pillar is a robust data collection process, having good data sets to take decisions and to kind of prepare actions that the city can implement. So I think that is one of the things that we looked at. So we've done 2 things basically. So we all look at addressing climate change through 2 lenses mainly, mitigation and adaptation. From a mitigation perspective, the greenhouse gas emission inventory for Chennai was one of the main kind of baseline numbers that we had to plan. And second, we looked at a risk assessment, climate change risk assessment for Chennai. And then after that, there was setting goals, targets, and developing the actions, which was pretty much part of the whole thing. So I think kind of critical to the whole thing is the whole part on consultations. And there were multiple rounds of consultations, but maybe we were not exactly able to cover the entire city. But there was quite a good representation that we had from NGOs, CSOs, technical experts, and of course the government. Because in the end of the day, we also feel that the government has to own this plan and really start, implementing this. So this is the first bit on building the evidence. So when we looked at risk and vulnerabilities from Chennai's perspective, there was a whole list of them that we could, from existing studies and data. And I think flooding is one thing that I'll try and touch upon in this presentation. So the regular usual suspects, sea level rise, heat, and flooding. So yes, so all of us have really, what? I think there's an issue with the colors maybe. It's fine on this. I think when it gets translated onto that, there's some issues with those colors. But I think this is just taking from the existing, what has just happened in Chennai during the, recent Mechong cyclone. So these are things that sir also touched upon. How much of rainfall, 800 of rainfall in 3 days, 250 around the airport, Meenambakam, on just one day, right? And so sir has touched upon these things. I'll not get into them. So what we used to understand flooding was this Seaflow's Red Atlas that is prepared, with support from the National Center for Coastal Research, and they have used multiple data sets to come up with this, areas that are prone to flooding, and they have modeled, various rainfall scenarios as well as, used temperature data, terrain topographical data to arrive at this. And they also obviously have done it using the RCP 8.5, which is, in a simple language, RCP 8.5 is actually a business as usual scenario. If we don't take any steps and we just go on, increasing emissions, we are going to see kind of, almost 5 degrees or 4.5 degrees increase in temperature by the end of the century. So again, coming to the areas that are projected for, as I said, inundation and not really flooding. So I think we had somewhere between a 1 in 5 and 25 year flood. I think it was the levels of rainfall was somewhere in between that, and we saw that, and we kind of just put the areas that got flooded. You see those dots, and it kind of does match with this, analysis that was done. So most of the areas that were flooded, in the recent floods were also ones that had been identified through this exercise that was done. And some of the areas you see in the central part, I think there's a lot of work that GCC has been doing to improve the stormwater drainage in those areas, the central parts. But I think the north and the south, there are still areas that need, improvement in the stormwater drainage network. So now coming to vulnerability. So we use this layer of flooding as a base layer, and then what we did is on top of this we started putting various other layers like the road network to understand what are the networks that will be kind of in risk when this kind of flooding situations happen. And we put metro, the railway system. So multiple layers were put, schools, a lot of social infrastructure was also layered on the schools, hospitals. So I'll just show you one out of this, just to. So Chennai has, as Sir said, the number of slums, and if you look at the kind of development, so we overlapped slum locations on this. And if you look, I'm just zooming into this. So if you look at, most of the slums have come along the canals in the city center, and they are all located near these areas that are of high risk of flooding. And if you see the difference in color, so the dark red are the slums that are high density slums, which have densities of almost 1,200 persons per hectare kind of a density. So many of these locations are actually in these flood prone areas. So what also kind of became, while this exercise is going on, is what do you really do in these areas, right? It's also a conflict. There are economic reasons why these people are also here in these areas, right? Their livelihoods are dependent on these locations, and as well as their children go to school around these areas. So there are already established networks. So what could be the solution to this is also something that we were really thinking about. And right now, what I think most of the schemes, my understanding is, they are creating these rehabilitation zones outside the city. People are getting cut off from the link. So how do we still include them in the city is also, a larger question that was really, there. So Sir's, I think he was here, he just more. So from Sir's recommendations itself, recent report. So just one point out of this that I'll pick on is maybe 1 or 2 points. This whole thing about drainage master plan and no development zone, and the other one was reevaluation of development guidelines. So I think we need to really completely rethink this for the city. I think till today, I think most of our cities in India and across the world, globally cities, the whole reason that cities come together is for economic reasons, right? To take advantage of that economies of scale that get created. So that is the whole reason cities have developed. But I think now we need to start looking at environmental factors to really drive city development. And I think one thing that we are hoping Chennai will do through its master plan is really identify the no development zones and clearly demarcate that on the map, and make sure that those areas don't get developed. And as Sir said, also look at a larger, I think, regional kind of watershed. And I think they have expanded the area, as you said, to almost 6,000 square kilometers. So Chengalpet, at the upstream so that we don't create similar disasters like we have done in Chennai. So I think the sensitivity of developing the region also has to come into play. And I think when it comes to at a building level, the development control regulations, we need to look at it differentially. It cannot be one size fit all. Like till today, we've had one set of FIRs just based on the road widths. But I think we have to look at our FIRs based on the locational characteristics of those places. It cannot be just based across the city. We paint one, that if you're facing a road width of 100 feet, you get 2 FAR. It should not be like that. But depending on the area, so these high flood zones, I think, has to be looked at differently. Maybe there is a need for de-densification in some of these areas that are, like really developed, or redevelopment of some of these areas. We have to identify buildings that are aging as well. Those be identified in these areas and redeveloped. And there might be need for some buildings also to be on stilts. So one thing that we also talk about is the need at the government level, at the local government level, also to have people who understand the city at that scale, right? At the scale of 1 in 500 or 1 in 1000. So the need for urban designers to also be part in the government, because right till today we've had a very engineering based approach to city development, where we've just been following the IRC guidelines of developing roads. We see the drains 1.5 meter on both sides everywhere. So I think we have to change those whole ways of working itself. Is the whole idea, and what is also, I think we at C40 also are trying to work with CMDA to try and integrate this climate action plan into the master plan. That's something that we are also looking at going forward. So I think end with this. This is the GHG profile of Chennai. I think along with the adaptation measures, it's also important to look at mitigation, because if we continue to emit, the greenhouse gas as we are continuing to grow, I think there's going to be more and more global warming. So I think both has to be looked in hand, and we also have to look at ways of reducing the emissions over time. This is some of the modeling that was done in the climate action plan, to look at various scenarios at how you can reduce, emissions over time. So this was, through the whole consultation process, the vision that came out, resilient and proactive Chennai. So there was 6 areas. So I will just talk about one, the 6th one, which is actually vulnerable population and health. So basically, how do we rehabilitate the populations living in these floodplains and the areas that are prone to flooding? Retrofitting was one of the options after we spoke to many of the stakeholders. Retrofitting is something that needs to be looked at, and there are already guidelines that have been prepared, but they need to be integrated into the development control regulations of the city. And also health, I think, is another issue. The vulnerable populations also have number of issues during these flooding events, which is related to their health, like issues related to dengue, malaria, increase of that. So having these small, like how they have in Delhi, these smaller points within these slums where they get at least the basic health services, like Basti cleaning. So these are some of the actions that came out. I think this is the last slide. So capacity building, we all talk about that, but I think
giving me this opportunity, because I'm talking to a audience which is totally different from the kind of people whom I have been talking to. Basically, I'm an ecologist, and I'm going to be only talking ecology. So far you have heard. Can you hear me? Yeah. So as an ecologist, I'm going to be talking to you only ecology, which may be initially very different from what you have been hearing so far. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Yeah. So as an ecologist, I'll be talking to you only ecology, which may initially sound a little different from what you have been hearing till now. But at the end of my talk, you'll realize that all that people have talked about so far will be connected through this. You know what I'm going to say, because I've also been closely listening to what everybody else said, and it overlaps considerably with what I'm going to say. So I will quickly, I'm not going to take much time. I just have divided my talk into four broad components. One, I will be giving you a brief introduction about ecology, because I presume a lot of people don't know much about ecology. And then I will talk a little bit about geography and climate of Chennai, because that is something often very badly understood, as far as Chennai is concerned. And then I will talk to you about biodiversity, because my focus is ecology. And finally, I will be talking to you about resilience and sustainability, because we have been talking about resilience all this time. Yeah, so now, slides are quite self-explanatory, so I don't think I will have to read through the slides. But basically, ecology is a word which is often very loosely used. It is often, used in the out of context. Everybody says ecology, but ecology is basically a science of ecosystems. Ecosystems is what we need to understand. And at the bottom left, I have given you what ecosystem is all about. It derived from a Greek word called oikos. Basically, it is home of organisms. Just like we have home of organisms, and how these organisms coexist and interact. So that is basically what we are talking about. Because morning, one of the speakers who talked about quantum theory, he said, everything is interacting, everything is. So this is the whole, universe is like that. Everything is dependent on everything else. So we cannot isolate anything and then really work on it. In fact, if you have seen my first slide itself, I was asked to talk about Chennai ecology, blue and then green. I would not do that, because the basic problem with most of our science as well as management is that we put things in compartments. You should not put things in compartments, because everything is interrelated. That is why I have put a hyphen there saying blue is related to green and green will. I will show you how this will work. So now, in every system, this word system is used to talk about order, because I am talking to an audience led by Madras Chamber of Commerce. And, a system cannot exist without order. And if there is order, it has to be, made possible through people's involvement and participation. So that is a system. So that is how ecosystems function. So this is my first message to you. Now I have just put this old picture. This is a picture that was developed in 1962 by an ecologist. This basically looks at how blue is connected to green. So on the left-hand side, I have marked blue, and on the right-hand side, I have green. This is basically a beach. The central line is actually the tide line. On the left, it is seawater. On the right, it is the beach. And in the center of it, there is a small crab. You can see it possibly in the middle of it. Middle of it, there is a crab. Many of you would have seen this crab in Chennai beach. All of you would have gone to Chennai. We call them the ghost crabs. These white-colored crabs with this long stalk-like eyes. They quickly run. You can't easily catch them. Ghost crabs are found throughout the beaches of the tropics. It's a tropical species. It's found throughout the world in the tropical region. So this example has been taken from a beach in Peru. Okay, so now what you can see here is that how things are connected. How things are connected. How the sea is connected to the land. And then you can see arrows to the right which take you further in. It goes into the forest so there is no end. You cannot put ecosystems or any system in compartments. Everything is connected. So we have to first understand this and work with a system which is dynamic and totally interconnected. So to highlight that, I have used this particular picture, very old picture. Now, all of you who are into business and who are into commerce will know this. I'm not talking to you in a very alien language. So interactions can be between the same species, a human to a dog or an elephant or any other animal. then humans, and to the environment. We have so far been talking about interactions between humans and the environment. We are talking about disasters and hazards and things like that. So there are 5 kinds of interaction which completely control the ecosystems, and this is there in every system. When you talk about business or when you talk about anything else, these 5 are there. First is association. Species associate with each other. Species compete with each other. Species, they prey on each other. And they also parasitize each other. Sometimes they also cause diseases. So this is in every system you will find these 5, and I call these 5 the pillars of an ecosystem, the 5 pillars of an ecosystem. Now these in turn are affected by the 5 bhutas. The Panchabhuta that we are talking about, the sun, the wind, the atmosphere, water and soil. So the 5 that we traditionally call the Panchabhuta affect this. So it is a very complex process. So today when we are talking about climate change, we are talking about a very complex process which not just involve water or it does not involve heat. It involves so many other factors, and all put together they create a system, and this system is very dynamic. So this is something we need to understand. Now, talking about Chennai specifically, that is the background. When you are talking about ecology, I just told you about ecology. Now, Chennai is a highly misunderstood place in terms of its geography and climate. First, you have to understand it is a tropical maritime city. It's a tropical maritime city. We don't have many maritime cities in India. We have Bombay, we have Calcutta and Chennai. These are the 5 mega cities. There are smaller cities like Visakhapatnam, Trivandrum and so on. Now it is warm and humid. Warm and humid, it's not just warm and dry, it is warm and humid. And it is fully controlled by one of the world's largest marine ecosystems, the Bay of Bengal marine ecosystem. There is this Intergovernmental Panel on Ocean, Intergovernmental Ocean Commission. It's called IOC. They have divided the world's oceans into 11 large marine ecosystems. Okay? So in India, we have 2 marine ecosystems. One is the Arabian Sea ecosystem in the west and the Bay of Bengal ecosystem in the east. Now, Chennai is completely controlled by the Bay of Bengal marine ecosystem. So whatever happens in the Bay of Bengal will affect Chennai. Okay, so we are not able to do anything to this. We are only kind of victims. So we have to prepare ourselves to cope with this. Okay, so this is something we need to understand. Now, there is a difference between climate and bioclimate. Ecologists, we talk about bioclimate because that is something that is affected by living organisms, and living organisms themselves affect it. Because trees can affect the climate, climate can affect the trees. So bioclimatically, they divide the world into zones. And by that classification, Chennai is not a dry area. Most people have planned Chennai, British had planned Chennai as a dry area. Water scarce area, there is no water, there is no water. It is not the case. It falls in the moist to wet zone. Bioclimatically, it falls in the moist to wet zone. Strictly speaking, a region that receives less than 1,000 millimeters of rainfall annually is treated as dry. So Coimbatore is dry, but Chennai is not dry. So let us not make this mistake in believing that Chennai is a dry city. Chennai is not. It is a moist to wet city. Now it is subject to vagaries of the monsoons. Monsoons by themselves are very variable. Monsoons are very variable. We have 2 distinct monsoons, the northeast and the southwest. They are variable. Their arrival time and then their ending time varies considerably. So all that affects Chennai. So Chennai is subject to a lot of climate vagaries that is inherent, that is not caused by us. It is inherent. It is there. Chennai has survived all this for thousands of years. And now, what we want to do is something we have to think of. Now, continuing with this, I want to say that the rainfall is erratic. My previous speakers, they spoke about it. We do have dry seasons. We have got more than 2,000 millimeters rainfall. So that is there. Now, the landscape, when I am talking about Chennai, I am talking about the extended Chennai, the 5,904 square kilometers that we will be hoping to see as Chennai in the next 5 or 10 years. Okay. So 5,900, it's very heterogeneous. We cannot manage Chennai as one homogeneous unit. It's a heterogeneous unit. So it is a mosaic of microclimates. So there is a branch of ecology called landscape ecology. So landscape ecology, architects would be able to appreciate it much better. By landscape ecological definitions, anything less than 10 square kilometers is micro. Okay? So when you call something as a micro watershed or anything, strictly speaking, anything less than 10 square kilometers, which is like 1,000 hectares, like, for example, it may be about 2 times IIT Madras or IIT Madras Gindi National Park combined and maybe Velaseri. So it is a unit. So if you really look at it, Chennai, the way it has been managed, it is 15 zones and then so many about 200 wards. So they actually, each ward covers several micro zones. This is the basic problem. So if you really see, given the size of the microclimatic zones, you will find at least 600 microclimatic zones in Chennai, if not more. So this is the problem. So our planning has to really address these at that scale, not at large scales of zones and wards and so on, but let us look at them at micro scales, because when we are widening Chennai, these are the problems we are going to face, and we need to address this more carefully and more locality specific way. Now this picture Dr. Janakarajan showed, this was done by one of our colleagues in Kerala. I did not bring the entire series, I just want to show you what has happened in 30 years. 1980 and 2010, you can see very clearly how the push for development is by compromising on the blue. We are losing the blue to enhance the green, because today the push is to green Chennai. Dr. Balaji is here. 2016, after we had the Varada cyclone and then lots of trees were uprooted, we were given a study to, estimate the tree cover in Chennai, and Dr. Balaji was the one who led it. So the push is to increase the tree cover but decrease the water cover. Now this is a bad planning. This is clearly a bad planning, because this is, you could see 30 years ago how much water there was in Chennai and now what is. And this red color, although it is a built area, every built area has a component of trees. You go on planting trees, and people are planting Miyawaki forests and so on. So this is a very bad, unscientific move in my sense. Now, third component is biodiversity. Many of you don't know what biodiversity is. It's the variation in life. Bio is life and diversity is variation. So everything that you see around us. So you may be surprised to know that Chennai, despite all the big development, there are, and this is based on first-hand data that we have. I am not talking about anything else from anywhere. At least 1,000 species of flowering plants. Flowering plants are the higher plants. They are not the mosses and ferns. It is the woody higher plants, or what we call flowering plants. At least 1,000 species of plants are still found in Chennai. It's a fairly large number. Then there are 600 species of vertebrates. Vertebrates are animals with backbones, amphibians, fishes, reptiles, mammals, and birds. So at least 600 species still exist in Chennai. And then invertebrates are poorly known, because tiny insects most people don't know. But even there, from the known groups, we know more than 300 species. So now there is fair amount of biodiversity existing in Chennai. We really do not take these into consideration when we are planning Chennai's resilience and, kind of how to manage. This is very important. We need to keep this in mind, that there is a whole group of organisms existing in Chennai, coexisting with us. They are ready to support us. We have to look at them and we have to learn from them and see how they are coping, and we should try to cope based on how they are coping, okay? So, there are of course alien species, which is common to all urban areas. All urban areas throughout the world will have a dose of urban alien species. So in Chennai, the 20% of the plants are alien. And interestingly, 30% of the fish, we don't have alien birds, we don't have many alien mammals and so on, but fish, which we don't see. We have to go underwater to see this fish. Chennai has got more than 100 species of freshwater fish. At least 30 of them are from other parts of the world. So fish is a very threat, because it's a very important source of food. Today we are talking about linking food to climate change. Nambi, when he spoke about it, for the first time, a COP, they have talked about the importance of food security. But if our natural population of fish, which people have been eating, have been taken away by fishes from South America and fishes from Africa, that is a serious problem, but we normally don't consider it a problem because we don't see what is happening underwater. This all happens underwater. So this is a serious problem. So then we have other organisms in Chennai. We have migratory birds. I will talk about it a little later. See, on the left you can see hundreds of these migratory gulls. This was taken in the Kamarajar Port, Ennur. Nobody will believe that Kamarajar Port, people are talking so much about port being a bad influence and so on. But so many of these birds have taken shelter inside the port. Now on the right you see IIT black buck. That is one of the last populations of black buck in Chennai. IIT has a few and Guindy National Park has a few more. Now quickly coming to the last point, resilience and sustainability. It was already told in the morning that resilience is the ability to bounce back. It's like a spring, you pull it back and then it shakes for a while and then it comes back to its position. So this shaking, that is called the lag time. How long does it take before it comes back to the original position? So this is ecologically called the lag time. So lag time can vary depending on the position of the particular area in the globe. So this is something I would not go into great detail now. But then you need to understand that resilience is contributed by interactions. The more interactions we have, the more resilient a system is. So if you are talking about an office, for example, if you have 50 staff, if 3 of them resign and go, you won't have a major impact. But if you have 7 staff and if 3 of them resign and go, then you will have a major impact. Okay? So the more people, more organisms, more interactions, the more resilient the system is. So that is something you need to keep in mind. This is where biodiversity plays an important role. Now humans must work in tandem. We should not interfere with ecosystems. We should work because we are also part of an ecosystem, although today we feel we are above it. But actually we are part of it. But we have this kind of a mindset which has made us think that we are above it and we can control the ecosystem, which will not work. We have to work in tandem with the ecosystem. We have to work with it. Now all ecosystems are self-regulating. That is just like any institution, any company. It is all self-regulating. You know how you are performing. So you pull out few, you add a few. And so ecosystems also do that. So self-regulation, we should not interfere with. Now finally, ecosystems are the keys to climate mitigation, because this I keep saying everywhere, because Earth is 3.5 billion years old. It is not just 1 or 2 years old, 3.5 billion years old. With the life, without life, another, so 4 billion years is when it was born, and then 3.5 billion years we have had life. Now it is the life that has made Earth resilient. From a system which was dominated by carbon dioxide, it turned to a system dominated by oxygen. That was done by living organisms. It was not because of a volcano or anything else. An atmosphere which was dominated by carbon dioxide was transformed into an atmosphere with oxygen, where today we are able to live, was done by plants. Okay, so throughout this 3.5 billion years, Earth has relied on the ecosystems to gain resilience. Today, if you leave the ecosystems alone, they will help you fight all these problems of climate change, because they are 3.5 billion years they have gone through so many. If you read geology and if you read prehistory, read about dinosaurs, they have all gone through various phases of climate change. Okay, and the resilience is given by living organisms. Humans alone cannot do anything. So this is some message that we have to get into our head as well as into the heads of our planners. Now, ecosystems connect the blue with the green. You cannot treat them in isolation. Okay, the blue is connected to the green by ecosystems. Distance is not a matter. I'll give you examples. Migratory birds. Chennai receives migratory birds. Palikarnai Marsh, sir showed Palikarnai Marsh. Birds come all the way from Europe into Palikarnai Marsh. The interesting thing is, they enjoy an ecosystem in Palikarnai Marsh and they carry it with them to Siberia and Mongolia and so on. So a bird in Siberia can make some change in Chennai. A turtle in Australia can also make some change in Chennai, because it comes all the way here to breed in the beaches of Chennai and then it goes back there. Okay, so it eats some food in Australia and excretes it in Chennai. We don't realize this, the connectedness of ecosystems, and distance is not a matter. And then the blue-green connect is critical to sustainable. So let us not think that we will restore only water bodies or will only plant trees. The connect is very important if we really have to think of a sustainable Chennai. So finally, to conclude, I just want this slide where you can see a typical blue-green system. This is how Chennai was in the past, because this word Neithal, many of you would have heard. Neithal, this is Neithal. This is the plant that was in early Sangam literature called Neithal. Now this is typically what is Neithal, the coastal ecosystem. So we have to bring back our wetlands to this condition. So this is I have just one more message before I conclude. That is this word climate, although it is not explicitly stated in this particular program, but we have talked about it. Whether we liked it or not, we have always talked about climate. Many speakers spoke about it. Now, climate is, to me, an acronym. And that, what it is? C is for commit. You have to make a commitment. All these climate talks, people are not making commitments. Nambi was telling us about it. People don't want to make commitments, but we have to make commitments. We have to learn. Everybody talked about learning from mistakes and learning from past experiences. We have to implement. Whatever we learned, we have to implement. Then M is we have to manage. See, people do projects. They get a huge fund from World Bank or from JICA, and then they do a whole, drainage system, but it is not managed. So we have to implement, and then we have to manage. And then we have to adapt. Adaptation is not human adaptation, management adaptation. When we realize that we have gone wrong somewhere, we have to keep changing it. So this is adaptive management, is the modern term that people are using. Train the future generations, train school children, train teachers, train policymakers, and so on. And finally, empower. There is no purpose in giving training to a person if he is not allowed to implement it. Okay? So climate is basically divided into these alphabets: commit, learn, implement, manage, adapt, train, and empower. I think all of us should go back with this message in our heads, and then we can really think about sustainable management of Chennai. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ranjit. It's almost 1:30. I don't think there's time for any questions. Maybe they can ask 2 questions. Anybody has? Please go ahead. There's a person here, and then you are the next one. Can you give him a mic? Yeah, ask your question, and the person who has to answer that also.
Yeah, strictly it is not a question. What I just wanted to comment on both the presentation. My observation on that, I am Dr. Balaji, former PCCF and presently advisor to CARET Trust. One thing is, what actually has to be done for the flood mitigation, what Dr. Janakarajan said, I really agree with that it has to be watershed based. And perhaps the micro watersheds of the Chennai, we have got 15 zones, it is likely to be increased to 20 zones, I suppose. So these zones may be made if it has not been already done. And this could, and especially those zones which are most vulnerable, those recently added areas of the Chennai Corporation, I think this may be addressed. Of course, you said the entire CMDA area also can be done. Most vulnerable areas, the micro watershed has to be assessed. We have to deal with the entire watershed, no doubt. But these micro watersheds can be studied in depth so that what kind of solution can be made, can be assessed. That is one point. The second point is what Dr. Ranjit Daniel said. We did for the Chennai city, how it can be greened further. We did about 3 years back. And the study actually, it is not to replace the water bodies. The water bodies has been replaced by construction. Most of the areas, water bodies have become colleges, universities, and real estate areas. They were not planted up. So it is not blue becoming green. It is blue becoming red rather. So what we had suggested is to increase the footprint of green footprint of the Chennai, how it can be increased, where there is scope. We studied the existing green cover and where there is scope for increasing green cover, and we had suggested 1 million trees to be planted in next 5 years. So that was the plan. So it is not blue becoming green, blue has become red. Thank you.
Thank you. The person there, that's the last question, otherwise you won't have lunch.
My name is Kuvam Ramasamy Arumugam. This Kuvam is a river 100 years back where the Tarambu Malar is there. Now, is it there? This is the reason is shelf only, or ourself only. All the water bodies contaminated. Are we cleaning? No. See, what is the 4 feet of height? Water is there in and around Chennai. More than 2,000 industries affected in Ambattur. More than 2 lakhs people are being affected. Are we cleaning regularly? Are we cleaning, monitoring what Chennai Corporation is doing, what CMD is doing, everything we are asking questions only. Are we helping out? What is the strategic planning we are doing it? Then where the water body is clean, where is the plan for the outing of the material, where is it being stored? Nothing has been planned. If it is going on like that, we are not going blue, we are going to red and more red only. This is my thing. We have to go for it, go for green, or otherwise we will not 8 years or 4 years. Every 2 years we have a flood affected area. This is my opinion. For the past 1 week, we have never, our companies are not started it. What is the solution for that thing? We have to go together, solve the problem. Not blaming central government and state government. Our own self, we have to do some disciplining manners. This is my thing.
Thank you. So let me just wrap up. The common message that came out is that our approach has to be holistic. You cannot put things in silos and expect things to work. Because we are an interconnected world, actually we're an interconnected universe. There's no way that you can handle. Yes, each of us can handle a small portion because we can't handle everything. But somebody has to be there to have the big picture, and that's where the urban planners come in, when it's an ecosystem as far as city goes. So I'm glad Benjamin said that we should have more people who think about these things in the government. I've had interactions, like I said before in my opening speech, there are more people to approve layouts rather than plan really something more. So this is something that we need to do. And one of the other things that we said is basically we need to be connected to each other, communicate. Benjamin spoke about lack of communication. We speak a lot as Indians, but we don't communicate because we don't listen. We are already getting reactive about what somebody's talking about. And this is something that I've noticed. I'm not saying in a derogatory sense, but if you see various diaspora of people across the world, we very quickly start forming an answer before the question is asked. And that is something that we need to really sit down and say, okay, what is it that really is required? We've spoken about, a lot is spoken about COP. The information I get from all the political sweet talk that the COP did, I think you were there, somebody was there, is that we cannot get rid of fossil fuel for another 50 or 100 years. Hopefully something will come about. So the question is not getting rid of it, the question is responsible use for it. And as India being a developing nation, I don't see us reducing our, what you call, emissions. We might get to a lower per capita emission because most of our population is poor. We need more power. What are you getting from? From sun? From wind? Yes, they are seasonal. They are acts of God. You still have to have coal or whatever, possibly hydrogen at some point of time, where we need base fuel to ensure that we have enough power, because we cannot deny 50% of our population the same standards of living that we are having. Yet, but we can do it in a better fashion than we did. So that's one of the things that we are looking at. So this is one of the things that, so when you talk of resilience, it does not mean denial of things to people. It's a question of how we do things a little better, giving the right kind of facilities to everybody. Unfortunately, the people who don't think, oh, this gentleman said we have not done, yeah, I agree with him. It's not a natural disaster, it's a man-made disaster, and driven by our own greed to have more and more at the cost of giving less and less to our future generations. And that's going to be the situation. So this is basically it. So we have to go with nature, as Dr. Janakarajan said, and also Dr. Ranjit said. If you are not, dancing with nature, nature will go beyond you and teach you a lesson, and as it is being doing now. So with this, I think I thank all the speakers. It's a pleasure having all three of you come and speak here. We do carry some of your things, but again, let me just reiterate the fact that we have to implement. You implement in your own microsystem around you. I'm sure all of us start implementing, the micro can become a macro. So with this, thanks for sitting down here with patience and listening to all of us. And thank you once again.
Mr. Ranganathan, can you present a memento to all the speakers? To Mr. Benjamin, who had come all the way from Bangalore. He was a bit worried whether we'll have rains today also. So he checked with me whether he can still come. And thanks a lot, Mr. Daniels, for a wonderful presentation. And I would present a memento too. Yes. Today you have right now you have a different hat as a chairman of this session. I'll announce, at least let people start having their lunch. Okay, thank you so very much for your patience. I know we are delayed quite a bit. Enjoy your lunch and please be back by 2:15. We will start the afternoon session a little later, but not that late, please.